Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your eye-opener report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. As residents of the Eurozone are all too aware these days, and others around the world are gradually beginning to understand, large, centrally administered monetary unions may be the dream of the central banksters and the technocrats, but are a colossal failure in meeting the needs of ordinary citizens.
Well, we've already seen a very strong reaction on the market. On the stock exchange in Milan, that was down about 3.5% today. Italy's borrowing costs were up, and clearly there's a great deal of disquiet amongst international investors and amongst the markets on the implications of Berlusconi's return to politics.
Many fear reduced budgets will lead to job cuts and contracts not being renewed. The ruling People's Party says the cuts will save 10 billion euros in the next year. And conservatives estimate that Spain has nearly 15 billion euros in unpaid debts.
For 2 years now, the Greek parliament has been the backdrop to a violent choreography. Thousands gathered again today in Constitution Square. Trouble was ignited after a peaceful demonstration staged by the largest public and private sector unions in Greece. The third general strike this year, it was the first to test the cohesion of the new coalition. Prime Minister Antonis Samaras is trying to push through more cuts and tax hikes to secure another 31 billion euros of bailout cash. Petrol bomb.
As we examined on the program last week, the standard monetary paradigm of the developed Western world relies on central bank-administered fiat money created as debt-based instruments owed back at interests to the very banksters who are given the privilege of creating that money out of nothing. With a literal license to print money and to direct that money into those sectors of the economy that they see fit by approving or denying credit to businesses and industries on a whim, it is not difficult to see how the system benefits the banksters first and foremost. But as we see in the European example, when this system fails, it is inevitably the banks themselves that are deemed too big to fail, and the ordinary citizens who are left on the hook for the trillions of dollars in notional debt that has been rung up in their name. What happens then when a currency begins to fail? Must the public merely wait for the inevitable collapse and then submit to whatever new monetary paradigm the banksters create from the ashes of the old order? As the people of Greece are finding out, the power ultimately rests in the hands of the communities to bypass the international monetary paradigm and to create their own system for facilitating local trade.
Wander down to Volos Market and there's one thing you won't need in your pocket: money. From handicrafts to food, everything here is for sale through TEM, a new alternative currency. Locals build up credit by offering goods or services. The value is recorded in a central computer network, allowing them to spend their TEM on whatever they choose, however exotic. A traditional bartering system returning to today's Greece.
This period it's not easy with money to exchange money, so it's great to exchange with what I can offer.
We have reached the bottom of our lives. Now where we want to think in a different way.
Since it began, this network has built up over 800 members and it's growing every day. A grassroots initiative for people now struggling to afford things with euros. And it's spawned other bartering and exchange systems around the country as Greeks look for new ways to beat the financial crisis.
Earlier this year I had the chance to talk to Eyal Herzog, internet entrepreneur and alternative currency advocate, about the various alternative currencies that have been tried in the past and how they have helped communities thrive in the face of economic adversity.
So, of course, the local currencies are just popping out everywhere. It's beautiful to see it. It's like flowering, because people are realizing that they can do it so much easier today than before, thanks to also to the digital means that everyone has. And it used to be a complicated thing that you needed to print notes and make it so that it's hard to copy them. So it was really a big challenge to create a currency. But today it could be as simple as issuing a digital command, and voila, you created your own currency that can be managed online. And people can extend that currency to the offline, but the heart of it is online, and all the accounting is done essentially online, which is a very, very good news for everyone that wishes to create a virtual currency. Now, the Brixton example is a great example because it is essentially a neighborhood in London, which is, I could say, a poor neighborhood, and they have decided to create this currency that is exchangeable with pounds. So you can take pounds and buy Brixton pound, and you can also create, you can actually redeem those Brixton pounds into pounds whenever you want. So that means that everyone is very welcoming. Everyone can accept it. No one should worry about accepting it. It is essentially an advantage to use it in order to inside the community, because people do not have to pay banking fees. You can actually pay with SMS. And again, when you pay with a credit card, you pay 3 to 5% fee. So businesses are very happy that they don't need to pay those fees anymore. And, they're happy to pay their employees part of their salary with this currency, because their employees are going to use this currency in the neighborhood to drink coffee, or to get a haircut, or whatever that be. So this is a great example of how a community chooses to keep the money inside the community. Now, when you think about it, if more and more people are using Brixton pounds every day, so the deposit of pounds is getting bigger and bigger and not really used because people are not using the government money in the community to cooperate. So they don't need the money that they used in the past. They don't need it anymore. And this means essentially that this money can partially actually be used in order to acquire things from outside the community into the community. And they're looking forward potentially to disconnect the currency someday from the pound and make it an independent currency. So this is essentially a neighborhood that is taking control and saying, we can cooperate by ourselves. And that's what they did. And it's a very, very nice example. There are many videos online. There's a lot of the platform that they're using in order to run this currency is open source. So essentially everyone can use it and install it and operate it in his own community. It's actually a pretty simple task.
Although monetary reform is often posed as an all-or-nothing affair, and advocates of debt-free, infrastructure-backed government fiat love to argue with sound money goldbugs for ultimate control over which form of currency should become the standard in the future, an idea that is often overlooked is that of complementary currencies. Why must currency be limited to one set definition, administered in one single way by one single agency or bank? Why not have multiple coexisting complementary currencies that augment and bolster each other, thus diversifying the possibilities of the economy and hedging against the collapse of any particular form of currency? Earlier this year I talked to complementary currency researcher Matthew Slater about this very concept.
During the Depression, both in Germany and in the US, there were many complementary currencies or local currencies springing up all over the place, because what a depression means is that there's a shortage of money in the system. All the money is being used to pay back the interest on the money. And so it's not available for the nominal users of money, the people, to facilitate their exchanges. And so it's a very fertile environment, both in the 1930s and now, to create new local currencies. And again, in the 1980s and 90s, when there were recessions, that's when lets and time banks came into existence. These are both with very specific designs, and they were outside of government and politics. So they were designed to be run by community groups. And you might not even think of these as currencies. They're mutual credit systems. And that just means that all the people in the group or in the community have accounts, and they list the debts between them and add them up in order to get a balance. And then all the debts add up to zero. And that's the simplest kind of money system, and it goes back a long way in history as well, and you can find very similar things in other cultures.
Well, that's right.
Today.
Well, perhaps we should pause for a moment just to clarify why that's important as a different type of system, and what fundamentally underlies that type of system as opposed to the type of fiat currency that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a fiat currency system, the government or the commercial banks issue credits out of nothing, and even charge interest on them, which is absolutely paradoxical, because there's no real value behind it, and there's no assets or commodities behind it, and yet they charge interest as if they're lending you something of value, which could be earning a return elsewhere, and yet it's completely unlimited in quantity. And so that's the kind of paradoxical nature of the fiat system we have today, where these credits are issued and then they circulate as things in their own right. But this other way of doing it that was discovered on the Babylonian tablets, it's money as an accounting system. So as I said before, you just record the debts between different members of the system, and then they pay them off, and then it's back to zero. That's what you might call a sustainable system.
It is, but one would imagine that that's much easier to implement and much easier to do in a small local community where everyone knows each other and everyone specializes in a certain part of the economy, and thinking of a limited economy, but thinking of the incredibly diversified global economy that we have now, it becomes much more difficult to wrap your head around that type of system.
Exactly, and it's very difficult to even think about local economies when in my local supermarket they're shipping in garlic from China. I mean, is anybody growing garlic around here? And what would we do for garlic if we only had local money to spend? Or if the globalist international money stopped working? Where would we get our garlic from? We'd probably have to do without until some people figured out how to grow it. And this is a constant problem. Yeah. All that we rely on in our day-to-day lives comes out of the global economy, and the local economy doesn't really provide anything that we need. It's just resellers for the most part, and if you're lucky, a few farmers who are producing vast quantities of the same vegetable.
As has been pointed out by many over the years, these alternative and complementary currency ideas look good on paper and occasionally even serve to further trade within a given community. But very rarely, if ever, do they grow into a monetary instrument that is able to truly match the resilience and utility of the prevailing legal tender. This is because these currencies are inevitably circumscribed by the limits of the community itself. A community currency is only as useful as the community which uses it. Until now, the idea of community has been necessarily a geographical construct, and thus community currencies have been mostly limited to small, local groups of businesses. With the advent of technology, however, there is now the possibility for a radically different monetary system, with the potential to connect people around the world in ways that were never before possible. We will look more closely at this idea in next week's installment of this series. Meanwhile, as the euro debt crisis continues to make headlines and the US fiscal cliff continues to loom, it's important for the public to realize that there is more to be done than to merely sit idly by, waiting for a credit crunch or, worse yet, total monetary collapse to wipe out their savings and their economic livelihood. At the very least, those who are actively contributing to and participating in their own local alternative community system are building up the structures that can survive just such an economic meltdown and contributing to their local economy as they do so. This is the type of win-win situation that the banksters in charge of the current system would prefer you never find out about. This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com.